What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. It's December. We're in the holiday spirit over here. What better way to get festive than with a video on The Nightmare Before Christmas? Is it a Halloween movie? Is it a Christmas movie? Or is it both? A Halloweenmas movie. Weemus. What word does that sound like? Let's just run that intro. Alright, so in this video, I'm going to break down exactly how I made this Nightmare Before Christmas poster. This was actually only the third piece I had ever made using both Blender and Photoshop together, but it was fairly simple to do for the most part. And if you haven't noticed, I actually have it hanging on the wall behind me. And this is because one of my favorite poster companies, Hero Complex Gallery, invited me to join their roster of artists. So if you want this piece for your home, I'll put the link in the description. It's a limited edition print and there's only 100 of them, so if you snag one, thank you, that's awesome. And with that, let's start this holiday voyage and dive into episode 3 of Behind the Layers. So starting off in Blender, the first thing I did was add a plane and scaled it up. Then gave it some subdivisions in edit mode. Reset the scale, then went into sculpting mode and just pulled up the center area to make the main hill. I quickly set up a rough idea of where my camera would be, then made another floor plane, added subdivisions in edit mode, and sculpted 2 smaller hills in the back. From there, it was just doing small adjustments to get them to look how I wanted in the camera view. After that, I simply added a snow texture to both, then a subdivision surface modifier, and then the ground was pretty much done. Next, it was time to make these gravestones. I came up with about 5 shapes that I wanted to use, and then just started modeling them. They are all pretty simple to do. For example, this one was just a cube. I scaled it down to a base I liked, inset that top face, then extruded it up a bit, inset that face, then extruded it up again. I added 7 loop cuts to it, then grabbed the vertices and just shifted them to make the rounded top. I added a loop cut to the side, then some across the front to give it some more geometry. From there, I added a bevel, subdivision surface, and displacement modifier to get this look. I duplicated this gravestone to make sure I had a backup. Then with the new one, I applied all the modifiers, added a multi-resolution modifier, and then started sculpting. I just wanted to give it some dented edges and cracks. I did this for all 5 gravestones, then placed them on my hill. Once I had them where I wanted, I added a stone texture to them, and then repeated this on the back plane. I could have used a particle system for the back ones, but I didn't even know what that was at the time when I made this. Lastly, I set up the lighting. I added a nighttime HDRI, and then a huge circle that was set as an emitter to act as the moon, and a big point light just for an added punch. Then I placed a PNG of Jack in there. I planned to render just his shadow, but the fact that he's standing on the back side of the slope, he actually wasn't going to be casting one that was visible to the camera. And with that, the 3D was done. I rendered the main hill and the back hill separately so I could have full control in Photoshop. I made sure to render with depth of field as well. So let's jump into Photoshop now, as we have a lot to do in there. So the first thing I did was simply place my renders in my Photoshop canvas. I added selective color to both just to give them a bit more of a blue tint. I then added a curves layer that actually brightened them up, but I inverted the mask to hide this effect. I then painted on the mask of the curves layer to reveal the effect and lighten up the sides of the gravestones a bit. This helped to give them some more shape and intensify the light that the moon was going to cast on them. Next, I added in this sky picture and scaled it way up. I added curves to darken it a bit, and then hue and saturation to desaturate it a bit. I wanted to mess with the position of the bottom clouds, so I duplicated the image, placed it behind the top one, and added a layer mask to the top sky layer and just blended the 2 images to my liking. Now it was time for the moon. I added in this photo, scaled it to my liking, then added a blur, a camera raw filter to bring out the details a bit more, and then an outer glow for, well, a glow. I then added a hue and saturation over top and set it to colorize and gave it a blue tint to match the scene. I then duplicated those layers and set that moon layer to overlay. This just kind of helped those white areas pop a bit more. And then I went to the soft round brush tool, scaled it up to be slightly larger than the moon, selected a light blue color, and just painted a bit more of a glow behind the moon. Okay, now for the snow on the gravestones. This was all hand painted, and you're probably asking why I didn't do this in Blender, and the reason is, well, I didn't really know how to at the time. but I wanted to have full control over how it looked, and I was worried I wouldn't be able to do that in Blender. Also, if I wanted to change the way it looked later, I didn't want to have to go back and do another render. So let's zoom in on this gravestone and I'll show you how I did it. This is simply just 3 layers that I painted from dark to light. The first layer is the base layer, which, like the name, covers the top portion of the stone. I used a darker color for this one. The second is a lighter layer that doesn't cover the entire top and has a bit more of a sporadic feel to it to help give the snow some shape and height variation. The last layer is that specular light. It is the lightest of the 3 colors and is painted strategically to show highlights and emphasize the unevenness of the snow. I used a cloud brush from my friend Maddie's brush set. I'll leave a link to them in the description, but you can honestly use a normal soft round brush for this. I then added a blur to all layers to match the depth of field of my render. And then yes, I did this on every single gravestone you see in this piece. The edges were feeling a bit bare, so I added in these tree models from none other than today's sponsor, Envato Elements. The 3D assets that Envato Elements has are some of my favorite resources Envato has to offer. Once you find the asset you are looking for, you can then rotate it to the proper angle needed for your piece. It is the perfect combination of stock photos and 3D assets. Not to mention all the other photos, videos, fonts, music, sound effects, and much more that they have to offer. Use the link in the description to get 50% off an annual plan. It drops the monthly cost to $16.50 a month on an annual plan. Envato Elements is one of the best ways to up the level of your designs while bringing the cost of assets down. Okay, so these trees needed some work to fit the scene. First, I added curves to darken them and then selective color to tint them blue. Then I took the soft round brush and painted along certain edges that I thought might catch the light from the moon. Since it was going to be snowing in the scene, it only made sense to paint some snow where it would probably build up on the trees. So I used that cloud brush again and just painted some snow where I thought it may pile up. I then added a blur to all those layers to match the depth of field. As you may or may not know, things have less contrast as they move away from the camera just due to atmosphere. So I dropped a blue from the sky, shifted the color to be a little bit lighter, and then used the gradient tool to make a slight gradient coming up from the bottom to add some haze to the back areas. I messed with the opacity until I got the look I wanted. So now it was time for our main character, the Pumpkin King himself, Jack Skellington. First thing I did was, you guessed it, added curves to darken him and then selective color to make him fit the night look. I then painted on a mask of my curves layer to bring some light back in, mainly on the right side of him and also around the fur, as those areas would be lighter on the edges just due to there not being anything solid behind them. I also hand painted a lot of strands on his beard just to enhance the detail. Next, I wanted his suit to be a bit more red, so I made a new layer and painted red over top of it, dropped it in overlay mode and used a clipping mask to clip it to Jack. I used a soft round brush to make some rim lights on him. These are a bit difficult to see as Jack looks like a damn flamingo. We gotta get this dude lifting. But also because the moon is so bright and large behind him. But zoomed in, you can see just how much they helped with the realism. Lastly, I made 2 layers for fur, one on top and one behind him. I put my brush on pure white and began painting fur on the outside of the white parts of his Santa outfit. Then on the layer behind him, I did the same thing. This is just to help replicate how hair and fur tends to almost light up around a subject when it's backlit. Okay, we're almost done here. Next was to add Zero. I used this stock photo of him, but obviously since he's a ghost, he needed to be slightly transparent and have a glow. So I added a layer of him behind everything that had no fill and just an outer glow effect. I then duplicated that layer, added a layer mask to it, and painted away some of it just to give him some transparency. I then hand painted a few more layers on top just to give him a bit more of a wispy ghost-like look. And then lastly, painted with red on 2 layers set to linear dodge mode to enhance the red glow of his nose. And for the final steps, I added a few different snow overlay images because you gotta have snow in an image like this. And then jumped into Camera Raw to color grade, and here's the final image. Overall, I was super pleased with how this one turned out, especially for it only being the 3rd image I had ever made using both Blender and Photoshop together. Alright guys, you know the drill. If you liked the video, please give it a like. Feel very free to leave a comment. I always read them all and I try to respond just like I do on Instagram. Please subscribe to the channel. I have a lot of fun making these. Follow me on Instagram, Twitter, and if you're looking for a little bit more help in Photoshop, I actually have a Photoshop Composite course that I sell. The link is in the description. It's about 10 hours long, which I know is pretty lengthy, but it covers a lot of stuff. So if you're trying to up your skills in that, check it out. It could be beneficial for you. And that about wraps up episode 3 of Behind the Layers. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and happy holidays, and I'll see you in the next video. Literally waiting for the train to stop shaking my apartment. Ugh.